My name's Simon Dring. I worked for the London Daily Telegraph, 40 years ago this was, and I was in Cambodia when my office in London called and said, would I go to Dhaka because the political situation there was getting very tense. So I arrived here on March the 6th, 1971, March the 7th at the racecourse when Sheikh Mujib gave that famous speech. And I was actually standing on the platform only a few yards away from him. I don't speak Bengali, but I have to say, listening to him, seeing the reaction of this huge crowd there, I understood everything that was going on. There was that one phrase in particular where he said, the struggle now is a struggle for our emancipation. The struggle now is the struggle for our independence. Joy Bangla. Joy Bangla. And I promise you, the hairs almost stood up on the back of my neck because I didn't understand it, but I understood it.
My name is Kirsten Westergaard, and I came to Bangladesh in February of '71. Down in Kumilla, we were sitting in front of the radio, thought we could listen to the speech, but the radio was cut off, so we never heard the speech. People thought that we should go to Dhaka. They said that women and children should be evacuated. But I'm a political scientist. If you're a political scientist, you really want to be in a place like this, where something is going on with nation building and everything. So I said, no, Amijabuna, I am not going. Every afternoon, Sheikh Mujib would then come out on this very balcony where we are sitting now, and we would all be in the garden, and we would listen to his speech, and that we would do more or less every afternoon. The last time was on the 25th, but he did not come out. So we could feel that something was in the air.
The first warning bells were sounded around about 5 o'clock on the afternoon of March 25th when we heard that Yahya Khan had left. Certainly the whole city began to become a little bit uneven and unstable. Some troops appeared outside the hotel here. This was the Intercontinental then, and this is where most of the journalists were based who were covering the situation. There were up to 200 journalists here. And clearly they were not encouraging or allowing you to leave.
Around midnight or a little before, we heard shotguns, and we went to the top of the roof. And from there you could see Dhaka burning, especially down in Old Dhaka, where the Hindus live, and over at the university.
That's when we knew, given the scale of the killing that was obviously taking place in this city, the scale of the massacre, because it was a one-sided thing, there was nobody shooting back, that they were never going to let us out to see what was going on.
And of course the next day there was curfew and we couldn't go out. We heard over the radio that Bangladesh had been declared independent.
On behalf of our great national leader, the Supreme Commander of Bangladesh, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, do hereby proclaim the independence of Bangladesh.
On the evening of the 26th, about 24 hours later, when there was still shooting going on, Pakistani intelligence officer, Major Siddiqui, came to the hotel and he spread the word out amongst the journalists that civil war had broken out and that for our own safety, because we might be killed by these Bengali buggers, he called them, he said, we're going to take you out of the country. I said, well, is this an order? Oh no, it's not an order, just for your own safety. So I said to him, so I don't have to leave then, I can stay. He said, you can, but it might be dangerous for you. So I said, well, what will happen if I stay? And he said, well, there might be a party for you, whatever that meant.
The journalists, they were told to leave on the 25th in the afternoon, and all of them left except two, Simon Drinks and a French photographer.
I escaped that by coming up onto the roof, and hiding actually down here under what was then an air conditioning unit. And in this way I felt a little bit secure, but at the same time I could go to the edge of the roof and see when the journalists who had been rounded up by the Pakistan Army were taken away. Once they went, of course, then I knew that I'd be safe, and made my way to find the Bengali staff at the reception, who were very excited. And they said, there's somebody else stayed as well, Michel Laurent of AP, a photographer. The next morning, they had arranged for a little baker's van. We put on kurta pajama, some attempt to disguise ourselves anyway. We got in the back of this little van. The first port of call we went to was the Dhaka University. And I have to say that it was an appalling sight. In the dormitories of Iqbal Hall, there was a lot of blood. I saw a student dead in his bed. There were students lying in the lake, or dead bodies. I couldn't identify all this. And quite clearly, the army had come in, they'd mortared the dormitory area, then they'd gone in and just shot people. And the students probably sat there thinking, oh, they'll just arrest us, but they were mistaken. We went to the Hindu area and to the old part of the city. A market area had also been attacked, and about 200 yards of houses had been burnt down. There were people dead in front of their shops. You could see as we went around that the whole areas where the flags had been flying, the Bangladeshi flags, were all taken down and replaced by Pakistani flags. After several hours moving around this city, Michel and I realized that the scale of the massacres here were really extensive. The problem we then had was, how do we get this film out? How do we get my notes out? We spread the cameras around a bit. We hid the film in the bottom of a sponge bag underneath soap and toothpaste. I put all my notes in my socks, under my feet. And Michel and I were taken by security guards into the plane. The plane took off. It was like the most fantastic feeling. I wrote my story and filed it. These were the first documentation of the scale of the Pakistani massacres in Dhaka.
My name is Barbara Blood Rankin. My father is Archer Blood. He was the consul general in Dhaka. The war broke out, and he sent information back to the United States via telegrams. He pretty much condemned the United States stand, which was supporting West Pakistan. Washington, D.C., and the ambassador in Pakistan made light of what was going on. So the telegrams got progressively more and more strongly worded. Well, one of the telegrams was considered the most strongly worded communique ever received by a Foreign Service officer, and it became known as the Blood Telegram. I believe the most likely eventual outcome of the struggle underway in East Pakistan is a Bengali victory and the consequent establishment of an independent Bangladesh. Here in Dhaka, we are mute and horrified witnesses to a reign of terror by the Pakistani military.
We heard that refugees were flooding across the border. We saw 10,000, 20,000 a day at one crossing point. My name is Julian Francis, and in 1971 I was Oxfam's special representative in Calcutta. We were really involved with the medical, sanitation, clothing, feeding for, to begin with 500,000, but it grew to 600,000. The biggest relief operation Oxfam had ever undertaken in its history till then.
My name is Michael Barnes, and in 1971 I was a Labour Member of Parliament in the British House of Commons. And I wanted, as a politician, to find out the political situation, to understand it. We went visiting the refugee camps, the big camp outside Calcutta. We then flew round to Agartala to see the condition of the refugees there. We had a meeting with the Prime Minister in exile, Tajuddin Ahmed. We also met General Usmani and his freedom fighter.
I'm here to remember my father, Ronald Garst, Dr. Ronald Garst. He's an orthopedic surgeon. He was in India, the war broke out, and his first reaction was that he must help the war wounded. He was not a politician, he was not an activist, so he knew that he could not change the course of time that way. But what he could do was to be a humanitarian.
Nearly everybody who could see what was happening at first hand was clear that the only way this situation could end for Bangladesh was the intervention of India. And indeed, it was in India's self-interest to intervene rather than to have this happening on its borders.
My name is Nandita Haksar, and I'm here to represent my father, Parmeshwar Narayan Haksar. In 1971, he was the secretary to the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and I do remember the first people who were escaping from Bangladesh coming to our house. And they were people who were later in the Bangladesh government. These people were actually, they had come to my father to lobby for Bangladesh. And I think it was an atmosphere in which I think all Indians felt this tremendous solidarity with Bengali nationalism.
I was working for the Ministry of External Affairs of the Government of India, and they decided to set up an office in Calcutta to liaise with the Bangladesh government in exile. And I was trying to work out the day-to-day nitty-gritty of just survival, finding places for the Bangladesh government to stay in, a lot of logistics. And the other level was messages from my government to the government of Bangladesh in exile.
I was responsible for planning and building up the logistics. You can't fight without weapons, with ammunition, food. Logistics is very important. Logistics was a major problem in 1971. It takes time to build up all these things. The infrastructure, roads have to be constructed. For instance, in Tripura, there was only one battalion. We had to build up the infrastructure for a complete corps. So 30,000 tons of stores were moved to Tripura, that during the monsoon.
World opinion needed time to come round to the view that this was the only outcome that was possible, a new, independent, free Bangladesh. So I think there had to be a diplomatic offensive.
We were trying to work out how to shock the world into doing something. So the idea was collect statements from people like Senator Edward Kennedy, Mother Teresa, and many of the well-known journalists of that time.
I come as the chairman of the Senate Refugee Committee, someone who's been greatly interested in the...
Senator Kennedy introduced it to the Senate. Then that had quite an influence on stopping arms being supplied to Pakistan.
We were a citizens group focused on influencing American foreign policy, and a wide group of people came together, mainly Americans, and then we were joined by some very extraordinary Bengalis to lobby on Capitol Hill and to promote an amendment to the foreign aid bill called the Saxby-Church Amendment, which would stop foreign aid to Pakistan.
My father, Bill Saxby, was a United States Senator from Ohio. He was on the Armed Services Committee. He became aware of the humanitarian crisis in Bangladesh and with several other senators introduced measures to stop further economic and military aid to Pakistan. This was successful. against the wishes of the administration as expressed by Mr. Kissinger and Mr. Nixon.
We wrote this letter to the Danish government and the Danish parliament, and we wrote this little pamphlet about Bangladesh, which gives the situation from when Pakistan was formed and the relationship between West Pakistan and East Pakistan. On the back, we wrote, Joy Bangla.
My husband covered the war story. I knew he wanted to become a war correspondent, like Robert Capa. So I knew no way to stop him. And he promised me to return home safely, so I just believed it. He just tried hard to let the Japanese people know what is happening in Bangladesh, using various media. I think he tried hard.
I did shoot a lot of footage during your War for Independence, and I did make a film. Well, I wanted very much to reflect the culture, the everyday lives. I wanted to show the beauty, and I wanted to contrast that with the brutality that had been inflicted on them, and how no matter how far the depth of their pain was, they were so stoic. I was so fortunate to be able to join with a troupe of magnificent entertainers, unique individuals that could sing a verse and just rouse you in a way that would make you want to fight for your country. And we were so lucky to follow them, trying to soothe the refugees and cheer the Mukta Bahini. It was really thrilling, and feeling like you were doing your part. It's about as close to heaven as I think I'll ever get.
So I've talked while I'm here in Bangladesh with Mukti Bahini and people who are really doing the fight on the ground, and I think they were aware of the support that they had from people all over the world. And so this was one way for some of us to express that support and to take action to do things that we believed in.
I remember the time when the planes were going over Dhaka University. My father brought the transcripts of the exchanges between the Pakistani pilots. And they were very cold-bloodedly saying that we are reaching Dhaka University, now drop the bombs, and it was something which even now I sort of get goose pimples thinking about.
On the 14th evening, Niazi and Farman Ali went to the American consul, Spivak, with the following proposal: ceasefire under UN, hand over the government to UN, withdrawal under UN. It was given to Bhutto, who was attending United Nations. He rejected it outright.
I will not be a party to it. We will fight. We'll go back and fight. My country hearkens for me. Why should I waste my time here in the Security Council? I will not be a party to the ignominious surrender of part of my country. You can take your Security Council. Here you are. I'm going.
On the 16th morning, a ceasefire was converted into an unconditional surrender in 4 hours. The surrender of 93,000 troops took place. This never happened before, larger than the surrender of von Paulus at Stalingrad.
And it was very satisfying to see independence arrive. One of the best things really for me was on the 27th we were able to see all the Bangladeshi flags coming down and the Pakistani ones going up. But then 9 months later in December when I came back here and I rode down from Mymensingh with the Mukti Bahini from Tangail and with the Indian tanks, and I was here in December 16, was to see all the Pakistani flags coming down and the Bangladeshi flags going up again.
I remember the journey I made in January 1972. The road from Calcutta to Jessore was jam-packed with refugees going home. There was a mixture of happiness, joy, relief and fear. What will they find when they go home? But there was a lot of shouting of Joy Bangla.
When Mujibur Rahman was still in Pakistan, and my father was on the phone, and I remember him holding this black phone which came scrambled messages, and he was tense because we weren't sure whether Mujib would be actually put in the plane by the Pakistanis or he would be killed. And as a child I was sitting there looking and the house was totally silent and there was this tremendous tension, it was tangible tension. And then he was saying, what has happened? Have they put him in? What has happened? And then they said, they've put him on the plane. And there's still this silence because even if they put him on the plane, we didn't know what would happen. And then he's boarded the plane and the plane is taken off. And then Papa turned around and told us that he's out. And there was this celebration.
Sheikh Mujibur Rahman returned to Dhaka in one of the most emotional outbursts in that part of the world.
To be here when Sheikh Mujib came out of prison and returned to Bangladesh. And I have to say, I climbed onto the back of the truck and the atmosphere was fantastic. I was there on March the 7th, and now to see him coming back, it was like completing the circle in the history of the independence of Bangladesh. And I'm very glad and very honored to have been part of that.
To work day and night for a cause you believe in, and then to see that cause unfold and be successful, it's more than a thrill of a lifetime, it's an experience of a lifetime.
I feel a tremendous sense of gratitude, and I don't know of any other country which has ever said thank you.
We accept the honors that you have awarded to us with grateful thanks and with humility. Long may Bangladesh flourish. Joy Bangla!
You know, the people who deserve the most recognition are the people of this country. I think of the young Bengalis in the hotel here who helped keep us hidden, who helped us get around the city. They're the ones who we really should honor today.